Welcome to Redefining Engagement. I'm Francesca, Director of Audience Development and Strategy at Contribly. And in this show, I speak to leaders and innovators in the media industry so that we can bring tips, wisdom, ideas, and even some things to avoid so that we can all do more engagement better. So without further ado, let's move on to our next guest. Hi, Jessica. Thank you for joining me. How are you?
Good. Thank you, Francesca, for having me. Looking very much forward to this discussion.
Awesome. How about we start off with a little introduction? Would you mind, give us your name? Tell me a little bit about you and your job and what you do.
So, hi, I'm Jessica Bulthé. I work currently at Mediahuis, have been for the past 4.5 years. I'm currently a Chief Data and Insights Officer at Mediahuis for the entire group. We are active in 6 countries. So in Belgium, which is our headquarter, in the Netherlands, Germany, Ireland, Luxembourg, and the UK. And I think that adds up to 6.
Yeah, it does.
Probably. So yeah, I have been in this position in the past 6 months. Before that, I was leading a data team within Belgium. And before that, I was working on the B2C and B2B data strategy for the 6 countries.
It's a very exciting role that you've got, especially in the last 6 months.
Yeah.
What's your big focus?
Well, the regular stuff that we do with data, of course, is having these data platforms available for the different data teams, having tracking done and so forth. But that has been in the past 10 years our main focus. Of course, also in the past 7 to 8 years, we started working on what we now call traditional AI with machine learning. And then ChatGPT got released 2.5 years ago, and then suddenly everybody realized the potential AI and Gen AI has. Then instead of trying to convince business to work with data to become data driven, we suddenly had a huge inflow of requests of, oh, can you do this with Gen AI? Can you do that with AI? So the biggest challenge at this moment is scaling up as fast as possible to handle all the incoming requests, but also building up these new capabilities that come along with Gen AI and the challenge that we have in terms of having Gen AI solutions scalable for the editorial rooms, but also for customer facing. And that's one part of the challenge. The other part of the challenge is, of course, the AI literacy in the entire company. It's
Yes.
also a huge focus that we try to find a way through. It's not easy. We have almost 5,000 employees, and to get them all AI literate. Some of them are very enthusiastic, but then forget the security things around using AI tools. And then others are very in fear and not very change happy. So we try to find different pathways in terms of educating all these different people to become AI literate in the upcoming year, 2 year. And then, of course, the third challenge is more as a media company overall. How will our business change with these upcoming new platforms like Perplexity and ChatGPT?
Yeah, it's very expensive to do, and you don't know what necessarily the return on investment is for all of the different things that we're doing.
Well, the thing is, you have to experiment before you know the return of the investment. So you need the investments in different. I think we are currently running over 25 experiments or proof of concepts at the same time with Gen AI. So we have to do these proof of concepts to then investigate what the potential return of investment could be. And then it's sometimes kill your darlings, the ones you believed in the most before the proof of concept turned out to be not very big on return of investment. And then you have to say, okay, well, we tried, but now we learned that this is not the way to go. So it's a lot of speed and also a tiny bit of chaos, to be honest, sometimes.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
You've got an exciting role though. And I'm sure a lot of what you're doing is linked to engagement because obviously having been from the B2C team, I'm assuming the audience is a massive focus.
Of course.
Yeah. Tell me a bit about what does audience engagement mean to you in your world?
Well, audience engagement, I think, is the core of what we do, to be honest. It defines the rhythm and the deepness. I'm not sure whether it's the correct word of English, but the deepness of the connection that you have with your audience. And
the depth.
How often and how frequent your audience actually engages with you wants to know what you're writing, what your audio and video are now. Also, it's not only text, but how often they are trying to connect with your content, and also how well they're connecting with it. Not just by clicking on an article and then immediately going away, but also how long are they listening to the podcast? How long are they reading the article? If they read an article, are they going to move to the next one or not? So to me, audience engagement is actually the core of a publishing company, because it tells you what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, how well it resonates with the people for who you're doing it for.
So it's about time spent, it's about returns, it's the data that you can see of what people are doing.
Typical recency, frequency, and volume, which are quantitative measures, but it's the sentiment behind it, I think, that resonates very well with editorial teams, because it used to be, when it was only print in media, you just dropped your articles printed somewhere, not on the streets, but in mailboxes and in stores. And you didn't get this immediate feedback on how well your audience engaged on the short term with the content that you're writing. It was always on the long term, because with print, on the long term, you saw the increase or decline in your sales. The nice thing about this digital revolution is that you get immediate feedback on how well your audience resonates with the content that you're writing. So that's, I think, very interesting in this digital age, that suddenly editorial rooms got immediate feedback from the audience on how well they're creating the content and how well it resonates, while it used to be the editorial teams were a bit more further away from their audience. They were right. And then somewhere along the way, they see an increase or a decrease in sales, but they also couldn't really understand, well, why is it increasing? Why is it decreasing? What does our audience like or dislike? Except for, of course, some angry readers or happy readers sending mails to the editors in chief. But that was like the only feedback that they could get from their content. And I think that's a huge change in our industry, that you get this immediate feedback constantly.
And it can be quite overwhelming as well. But and in print, you know, someone was joking recently about people might have been just coming for the crosswords and the puzzles, and they just happen to get content with it. And now we actually know if that's true or not when it comes to the digital side.
Yeah, and then you can ask yourself, is that really a problem or not? Because I think for Mediahuis, and probably for many publishers, the main mission is to make sure that there's independent journalism available for everyone. Really good quality independent journalism that impacts the society. It's actually our mission at Mediahuis. And if it takes crossword puzzles to get people to your platform, and then snackable along the way, get really good informed independent journalism about what's going on in the world, that's also because not everybody, and you see that with the last digital Reuters digital news report, last one that came out. Not everybody is as focused as we want to believe in the media industry on news and wants to know everything about news. But we need to make sure that how we do it doesn't really matter, but that it's available, or that we get people as much as possible good quality news by adding crossword puzzles in your app, so that it gets to your app to do crossword puzzles, and along the way they get good information. That's also engagement.
Has your definition of engagement changed, like, over the years at all?
Well, I think mine didn't really, because I only been present in the last 6-7 years in the media industry. Before that, I was into academic research. So my definition didn't really change a lot. But I think it used to be, before I entered the company, it used to be mostly traffic based, like how many clicks we got and how many Facebook referrals in the time that Facebook was a huge thing we got. So I think in the media industry overall, it has changed from just having how many clicks, how many page views, to more a behavioral measure and a qualitative measure in how well is your audience engaging, and does it contribute to the retention, or does it contribute to the conversion? And if you look rather to that than just page views, it really tells you much more about the quality of the content that you bring, that convinces people to start paying for your journalism, or to keep paying for the quality content that you bring. So I think engagement has evolved over the past 10 years. And I think it will keep evolving over the course of the next 10 years as well. It depends on how the transition is going in the industry, with everything that goes on with agents and Perplexity and ChatGPT. So very curious on how we will be measuring engagement in the upcoming 5 to 10 years.
Absolutely, definitely. And in your experience, what is the aim of your audience engagement strategy delivering on? So in your case, why should news brands be focusing so much more on engagement?
Well, as I said, it's about the core of what you do. So
Yeah.
to me, if you don't measure engagement, how are you going to evaluate the quality of your content? What we've seen in research at our company is that engagement is really one of the biggest drivers in conversion and retention. So, and specifically for audience engagement for your subscribers, it really tells you once they're paying how well they're retaining, but the retention comes from how happy they are with the content that you bring. And I think in the media industry or in the publishing industry, that's your key proposition that you bring. So for when you're focused on subscriptions, maybe it's different for publishers focused on B2B revenue, but definitely for publishers focusing on subscription, audience engagement or a good strategy around it really tells you very quickly before people start to cancel their subscriptions or before you see the decrease in selling subscriptions, it rather tells you quickly how well your content is contributing to the propensity to pay for people or the propensity to stay on board. So, it's a very good heartbeat, I think, that you have on
I like that.
basis that tells you how well it resonates with your audience. And it doesn't mean that you have to write content that is only making your audience happy. It tells you about quality that you bring of different perspectives on getting people from different backgrounds, different opinions, how well you're engaging all of them on your platform.
On the measurement side, so you mentioned recency, frequency. A lot of that is quantitative. How are you measuring like the quality? Is that just, part of the recency, frequency, or do you look at other things as well?
We struggled a bit with finding the right definition of audience engagement because there are two different domains using it. You have the editorial teams that want to have like this heartbeat on how well the content resonates. And then you have the B2C teams that want to know, hey, how many subscriptions am I going to sell in the upcoming month? And how many churns do we have to take into account in the upcoming month? So we kind of struggled a bit with different definitions that can really be actionable for both kind of domains. So, and like everyone, we started with page views and then we switched to attention time per week, so how long people are reading, but that's not really very actionable for B2C and for editorial teams. So then, and I think it was a couple of years ago that FT Strategies came along with a formula regarding recency, frequency, and volume. We tried that as well. And we did some research also with our churn model and our propensity to buy model, how well the formula of Financial Times actually predicts churn or propensity to buy. But we also added attention time. We also added recency separately. We added frequency separately. We added volume separately. We added different kind of combinations with recency, frequency, and volume to the model as well. And what we saw there is actually the best prediction for both churn as for propensity to buy is the number of active days. So the frequency, how often they come back. And that correlates the strongest, but the upside of it, it's a very actionable measure to use for both B2C as for editorial teams. It's also much more explainable than the complex formula of FT Strategies on how to drive if your engagement is going down. Well, it's this complex formula of recency, frequency, volume, square roots all over the place. That's not really easy to make actionable for both kind of domains. While we now say it's frequency, okay, it means if we then divide it in different segments, because the next step is after you calculate that for everyone, we divide it in 4 different segments. You have the green group, which is coming every single day or at least 6 days a week. Then you have the yellow group, which is around 4 or 5 days a week. You have the orange group, which is a bit more severe. It's only coming like 3-4 times a week, or 2, 3, 4, something like that. And then you have the red group, and that's everything below 1 time a week on average. And then you have these different segments, and then you can really check what kind of content is very useful for the red group. If they're coming, for which kind of content are they coming? And should we then also add up, for example, with people from the red group that are not yet subscriber, create newsletters with sales campaigns in that to drive like, hey, this is kind of content that you really like to read. So it's much more actionable because the only thing that you need to accomplish is get people on the platform rather than you need to combine recency and frequency and volume and everything at once. So it's it has not been an easy ride, to be honest. We're with 6 different countries. We have over 20 editorial rooms, over 8 B2C teams. So not everyone is always as convinced by the data that we have shown. So there are still some of the editorial rooms or B2C teams that are using a combination of both or whatsoever. But we try to really show through data that frequency is the best predictor, and it's also the most simple one to really make actionable.
It's so hard to take something so complex and bring it down to something so simple. And I can understand how a lot of people might be like, we're just looking at this, I need more. But it's actually such a skill. And congratulations for getting to that point, because I think that's one of the things that a lot of people get stuck with. Mm-hmm. What do you think is the biggest challenge in your experience? Like, what is stopping news brands from engaging better now that you can see the data, now that you're seeing what works with your subscribers? What do you think is stopping us?
I think, and this might not be a surprise to many publishing companies, but when we're talking about audience engagement, it entails a very close collaboration between 2 different domains that are not often very closely related to each other. And that's the sales teams or B2C and editorial teams. And the nice thing about audience engagement that it really shows, for example, that its frequency is not only showing how good of a quality the content is for the editorial teams to get immediate feedback on how well their content is received. It also serves propensity to buy, so subscription selling, and it serves also this retention of subscribers. But somehow, even though when they're aligned in what kind of metrics should we look at and really see the value for both kind of domains, it really requires a closer collaboration. And by dividing it in 4 subgroups to make it very easily spottable, it always already got them a bit closer. But I think the biggest challenge will always be the combination of working with editorial teams and sales teams to really drive engagement together.
The silos keeps coming up, and I think the faster tech moves forward, actually, the more we end up kind of splitting and going into our own little bubbles, don't we? That's so true. Have you done anything in your teams to, like, what do you do to try and kind of combat that?
Yeah. What we try to do to combat that is, first of all, we have 2 business partners in our domain, one who works more directed to B2C and B2B in terms of data strategies, and the other one works towards newsrooms. So what I try to do within my team is to get them together in the same meetings a lot of times and to get them to talk to each other. We succeeded in that. So, and that's the first step, of course. If the data strategy comes together and they're both working from a same perspective towards the different domains, trying to get them closer and try to build as well shared dashboards, which is also one step that you can take, so that they look at least at the same data and they talk about the same data points. And it's not like, hey, yeah, we see it decreasing here, but we see it increasing because we use a different definition. It's about already aligning the data from the start up and making sure that the people who are not working with data, not inside the different domains, already try to share the same view towards the different domains to get them to work more closely together. And I think from data point of view, the one thing you can do is make sure that they look at the same dashboards, the same definitions, and are talking about the same numbers rather than different kind of numbers.
It's fascinating because we do use so many different tools, and the data dashboard is potentially the one that brings everybody together so easily. The sales team will be looking at, your CRM and everything else, and then your editorial team are completely on a different platform. So it is great that you are the team that can potentially bring them together so much more. It's very exciting. What strategies have proven most effective in engaging audiences in your experience?
Well, what we noticed is mostly really directed onboarding after sales. So getting them engaged in those first 100 days. I think that's quite well known within the media industry, the first 100 days. And what we do there is, again, we work with different segments. So people who have subscribed, but for example, did not download the app yet, we see that has always an impact in the frequency of people coming to our platforms. So we really have a separate onboarding flow than for people not yet downloading the app, where we try to remind them and explain them very well how they can download the app, what the additional benefits are of that. People who haven't subscribed to newsletters, we also see there that has an impact on the frequency where they come to our platforms. We try to really, those who haven't subscribed yet, send them separate mails, trying to explain to them what's the added value of the newsletters if we see their reading behavior. So we also try to personalize that. So after the first couple of weeks, when they haven't subscribed to newsletters and we see that they're very interested in a certain type of content that fits very well with a certain type of newsletter, we send them an email as well. Like, hey, we noticed that you like reading about service journalism, for example. This is a newsletter that's all about smarter living. So if you want to stay up to date on that, please subscribe to this newsletter. It will get you the news first. Well, not first because it's on the same time on the app, but at least it's a bit more personalized and it increases the engagement as well.
So it's all focused on personalization?
Not all, but most. Well, it depends how you define personalization. It's personalization in big segments. So it's not hyper personalization that really is specific for an individual. For example, people who haven't downloaded the app, that's the huge part of the subscribers. Definitely the people who have a bit more older age. So it's not really that personalized in the sense that it's a hyper personalization. It's more like looking at different segments and how can we make sure that these kind of segments get engaged very well. Then another thing that really works well for us is, rather than having the individual engagement scores, is work with these 4 groups, the color codes. Everybody knows when we're talking about the green group, when we're talking about the red group. That really helps in talking about it across departments, because people immediately know, okay, the red group are the ones that are not really highly engaged. What can we do to tackle that? And rather than talking about the specific number of days or the specific range of days that people frequent our platforms, we just use color codes. And that got a huge impact on how well people are more willing to do things for the red group rather than the less engaged, more less than 1 time a week that they come to our platform.
I love the grouping. How do you focus on those different groups? Have you got a team that focus on each group individually?
No.
How do you divide it up? How do you focus?
It's actually divided up through the sales teams mostly.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, for example, for the acquisition team, the green group are the high frequent visitors that are very engaged, but not yet got a subscription. So that requires a different kind of tactic because they are ripe for plucking, or I don't know how to say it in English. But those are the really high propensity to buyers. So we see a very big correlation at that moment as well with the propensity to buy score. So we tend to give them a bit more sales campaigns and to show them a bit more often what the advantages are of having a subscription. While the red group, for example, for acquisition, so those are the ones, the fly buyers, or the people not coming that much often to our platform, those are not really yet people that you want to work in terms of acquisition on, because they're not very eager yet, I think, to buy subscriptions. So those are the ones that you want to show the value of the brand, the value of journalism, so more the branding campaigns rather than the sales campaigns. When it comes to retention, of course, the green ones are yay. Those are the ones that will stay on forever and forever in terms of a subscription. The ones that are redder, those are paying for a subscription, but not really using it digitally. And I'm saying specifically digitally here, because what we've seen with a main part of the red group when it comes to subscribers, those are very often full-time print subscribers with a certain age. So we subdivided a bit there, like full-time print subscribers who are still quite young in terms of 50, 60 years old. Then, those are the ones that you might get digitally educated at a certain point. So we have different ways of showing them the value of a digital subscription or a digital newspaper. Then the ones who are, 80, 85 years old and have been a subscriber for print for their entire life. Yeah, it's how did I say this in a good way?
You're happy for them to continue as they are.
Voila.
Yeah,
that's it. Let's call it like that. So it really helps to also focus your marketing resources or your retention resources to the ones that you can steer towards becoming more digitally active, or to make sure that, for example, the orange group who is digitally active, that they really see more and more the value again of their subscription.
It's really interesting because do you use the same approach for your younger readers? Everyone's always saying we need more young people to be joining. We want to focus on that. And I know that at Mediahuis you have a whole department that are focusing on like the Gen Z stuff.
I know.
But from a data point of view, is this something that you're focusing on as well with these same groups, or does it look slightly different?
This is mostly on platform, of course, so it means we're on our own destination. What we've seen when we did some research on younger people on our own destination is that they actually the top 10 most read articles by Gen Z. 9 out of 10 are also the top 10 read by older generations. So somehow when they get to our platform, they're reading the same type of content. So the thing is, it's not really about our content. It's somehow getting them from off platform to on platform is the biggest challenge. So in terms of engagement, I think it starts for younger people more off platform, is that you have to really show the value of your brand, the values of your brand, the added value of having independent journalism in the world. I think you should do that off platform and really show Gen Z what's all about and delivering them good content off platform and giving them a certain FOMO of all the things that they're missing out on your own platform. So it's a hard one because, as I said, when you succeed in getting them on your app and on your website, they show similar behavior and similar interests as your older generations. The thing is, the challenge is that they get so much good quality news as well for free on TikTok, on Instagram, on Twitch, on whatever platforms they are, that we need to make sure that we are distinguishable and really show them the added value of having independent journalism that they can pay for. What is the added value for their lives? What brings it to their perspective? That we need to do that much more than just having like this click-through rates of platform, trying to use it as traffic drivers for the younger generations, but really giving added value and showing good branding campaigns on what we stand for.
There's a lot of that idea of try before you buy. Like, it's already difficult to get them there, but once you get them there, what is the taste? Not just tell them, but like make them feel it.
Yeah, because the older generations, we grew up with newspapers on our kitchen table. I remember when I was only 6-7 years old, I knew every weekend my dad would get newspapers at the nearby store, and it were always the same too, because these are the ones that you read. And when I was 6-7 years old, if you asked me what's a newspaper, I could describe it. I could even mention a couple of names of newspapers. But now I have 2 kids, 2 sons myself. They're 7 and 9 years old. I work in the media industry, and I'm very lucky that my mother-in-law and my father-in-law actually have a store where they sell newspapers, because it's not because of the job that I do, but because of that my in-laws are selling newspapers, that they realize what a newspaper is. Because when I tell them that I work for media, for newspaper, they're just looking at me like, oh, but it's the paper that's grandmother sells. And I'm like, yeah, but it's also digitally on my smartphone, and it's also that. But they look at me like it's something different. And then I talk to friends who have kids of similar age, and when I ask them, do they know what a newspaper is, and they ask their kids in front of me, and they're looking at me like, a newspaper? Oh, not heard of it. And then one of my sons said, it's a thing that my grandmother sells. You know, the paper thing. So how do we expect when the next generations who grew up with parents reading on their smartphone, they're not seeing the brand on the table every single weekend. They're only seeing our brands off platform when we mainly deliver traffic drivers, like headline with a click-through rate to our platform. How do we show them the added value of a news brand?
Yeah, it's very difficult.
How do we get them engaged off platform to then get them on platform engaged? I think that's the biggest challenge that we're heading to. because a lot of the elderly people are using Instagram, following the news brands as an alternative for newsletters so that they can see the highlights of the articles and then click on the ones that they want to read. But that's for an audience that already knows your brands, that values your brands. But for an audience who never heard of your brand, except maybe somewhere from their parents at a certain point, you're not really showing the added value there. You're trying to get them to your platform without showing what they get in return.
It's hard because it's branding, it's marketing, and in our industry, we're great at telling stories, yet we're not necessarily the best at telling our own story. We think we never had to. We never had to.
It was done for us by having newspapers every single day delivered on your doormat and every weekend lying around in the house. So we grew up, and previous generations grew up with the notion that having a newspaper in the house was just normal.
That's what you do?
Through a screen, and my kids never see me reading a newspaper because they can't see me reading a newspaper or see me reading my mails. They have no clue what I do on my cell phone when I'm on my cell phone.
Well, the question is, will we go back to print in that case and go crazy on that? Like, I feel like so many things are becoming fashionable backwards. There's a chance.
It's a very nice me time and deconnecting from the digital world. So who knows, in 10 years' time, print is a new medium to get people attracted to news. Who knows?
Yeah. It's expensive, but it's possible. And have you ever had any audience engagement initiatives that you've done that have surprised you, where you just really didn't think that people were going to react the way they did? Or
I think the one thing that surprised me the most is more general, is once you have this audience engagement in place and people start working with it, how one action can make a difference in terms of the engagement. For example, I spoke about the ones that didn't really automatically install the app once they subscribed. And the nice thing is, after you send 1 or 2 mails and really explaining the added value of an app compared to the website, that you see not only they install the app, but afterwards that their engagement goes up and the churn score goes down. So of those people, and it just keeps surprising me on what actionable data. So really actionable data. That's very simple, not the complex measures with different kind of metrics in square roots, but also not a high machine learning model, which I was data scientist. So I like machine learning models, like make them really think they add value as well. But the simplicity of a single metric that is actionable, it keeps surprising me on how big of an impact that can have.
Yeah, the smallest things make the biggest differences. And let's maybe talk about tech a little bit, because you mentioned at the beginning all of these projects that you're trying with AI. And I'm really curious, like, what role does the tech and the AI and the analytics that you're working on, what role does it have in your audience engagement efforts at the moment?
Well, at the moment, it's mainly the churn model and propensity to buy model. But the one that made the biggest impact was a machine learning model where we really used the different kinds of engagement metrics as predictor for churn and propensity to buy. Because that really gave us the insight on what kind of engagement metric contributes the most towards the propensity to buy or the propensity to stay. And that's something that we could not have done without machine learning, to be honest, because there's only so many parameters that you can take into account as a human being. So that was a really crucial one to understand which kind of audience engagement we have to use. And afterwards as well, the churn model is one of the biggest, also not hyper-personalized, but used in terms of setting up groups that have both a low churn score. We can then check, is it due to low engagement or is it due to possible other factors? If it's due to low engagement, it's an easy fix between brackets, because it's never an easy fix, but at least you know quite well what to do is get them more often and more frequent to your platforms. When it's other factors, that's sometimes not easy to change. For example, one of the main churn drivers is also the way that people pay. When it's a monthly automatic payment, it's a very, very much lower churn score than the churn scores when you have to manually make the payments every single month. But then getting people to change their payment method is even more difficult than getting them to your platform more regularly.
Definitely. It's what about how you integrate the feedback into what you're doing with your team? So obviously you're getting so much information out of the data that's coming in, and the great work that you're doing with the LLMs to actually find out what is having an effect. How are you communicating that back to the teams to make sure that they can action it in a timely manner?
Well, we mainly have dashboards showing quite real time the impacts of certain actions that we're doing. So for example, also in terms of A/B testings that we do with those different groups, we create a dashboard so that the moment we start the A/B testing, like the A group gets a different action than the B group, that they can really follow up afterwards how well the A group is doing compared to the B group. So, and that's something that we really want to show them, because I think there's no really much sense of doing A/B tests if you don't follow up on how well you're performing. But I think it's also essential, besides the A/B testings, to get a dashboard to see how the evolution is going over the different audience groups and how well they are reacting to big dossiers or big investigative research things that the editorial rooms invest much time in. So they can really see the impact immediately on what the impact was on the engagement.
Anything else that you're doing in terms of engagement with on the AI side? Are you getting direct feedback from audiences into this loop as well, apart from your A/B testing? Or
not yet?
Not yet?
So you mean that the audience itself can respond to certain articles or comment on certain articles? We don't do that yet within the Mediahuis. Okay. There is a comment section on one of our brands, but we're only monitoring that for not having comments that are not really good. Like, I seem to get a word for that. So commenting that is racist or unethical or really biased or whatever, so that we can get them away from the commenting section. But we're not really yet using the comments that are posted there to get feedback immediately about the article. It's one of the things that is on the backlog of one of the many things that have been requested, but we haven't gotten to that yet.
Absolutely fair enough. And what do you think are the common pitfalls and challenges in these initiatives that you're doing? Like where do you tend to get stuck?
I think three things is first confusing engagement with clickbait or superficial interaction. Like they get on your page, they click on an article, they only read the abstract and go away again. That's not really engagement. That's not a connection that your audience is making with your content. It's just like a quick click and get away again. So I think that's often a typical mistake, that we don't really check the data quality in terms of how long are they actually staying on the page if you're using clicks or page views. Also, I think we often use audience engagement as one metric overall. I see with some other publishers as well, where you don't make a distinction between the different type of users, like the red one, the green one, because it's different. And also the actions that you have to do for these different kind of groups are different. And then also don't measure the impacts of your campaigns or your big dossiers as an editorial team, or your big investments that you make, not measuring the impact on the audience engagement afterwards. Because it's often these big dossiers ask for months of deep research, a lot of investigation. And if you're not using it for branding, then at least check whether it increased the engagement of at least your subscribers, and if could be also of your potential subscribers. So
absolutely.
Sometimes I think one of the pitfalls is you don't use audience engagement always as one of the return of investment metrics that you could look at as a journal.
In terms of skills, I think it's really interesting. When you look at your editorial room, your B2C teams, you're obviously giving them all of this information. What skills do you expect them to have to be able to respond to these properly? Is there a new... Because we're expecting journalists, for example, to have so many different skills at this point. What do you see that as on your side?
Basic data literacy is being able to look at the dashboard, understand what the numbers are, and how to interpret the signals coming from the dashboard. We invested quite heavily in that towards the editorial teams and towards the B2C teams, to really educate them to work with dashboards and to understand how they can act or not act on certain metrics. The second is the flow thinking. The customer journey flow thinking is really trying to understand how a user or a reader moves from anonymous to slightly engaged to engaged to ready to buy. Also, after the selling, how onboarding between different kinds of people might be different. If you were very fast in going from anonymous to buying, you might have not engaged with all the different features or all the different content that we're offering. If you are a long time user that slowly went from anonymous to logged in to engaging to still doubting to buy a subscription in a year time, and then suddenly buy a subscription, but you already seen all the corners in our app, in our website, in our newsletters, in our puzzles, in whatever you might have encountered, that's also a different kind of onboarding that you have to do. And that person already shows a deep level of engagement, or at least a deeper connection with your brand. And I think that's one of the skills that we often forget working in news industry is we create news. We didn't have a legacy of being very customer centric in the past because it's only in the last 15, 20 years that we became digital. Before that was printing the newspaper, dropping the newspaper somewhere and getting on for the next one for the next morning. So this customer journey thinking and really understanding the different behaviors that come along in the different points of the customer journey, in the different timings of the customer journey, that's something that really helps this audience engagement. Because you need to understand that the level of engagement somebody can show depends on the moment in time and the specific point in the customer journey they are.
It's hard, isn't it? Because we expect so much from all of the teams and data literacy. It's great that you've been doing the training. How did that go down? Like, obviously, on one side, data is extremely important, but people act out of emotion. How was that, like, getting the team to open up to all of these things that you're talking about?
It's the same dynamic that we're currently having with several Gen AI tools that we're creating for the newsroom. It's about collaboration and sitting next to them. So it's not that we created a dashboard for engagement somewhere in the corner or in the basement and then went to the editorial team saying like, hey, look at this, we have dashboard for you. Ta-da! It's more sitting next to them and saying, okay, what would you like to know about your content and what is important to you? And of course, you know where you're headed to, but having them involved in the process of creating a dashboard, having them giving feedback, and also learning yourself through the dialogue what is useful for them and what isn't, and what do they need from you in terms of data, and what is really nice to have and others should have. I think it's through that dialogue where you, on the one hand, explain to them very well, patiently, like, this is what you can do with data, this is what you can't do, and this is how you can use it, and this is how you definitely cannot use it. It's through a dialogue rather than a top-down dashboard that you put in front of their nose and just say, hey, we're going to explain you in 5 minutes what the metrics are, and then bye, do whatever we want with it. So it's more continuously dialogue, because when you do the dialogue while creating, they know who you are. So when things are not meeting expectations anymore in terms of your dashboard, or they want new things added to the dashboards, that's actually very easy to do because they know you and they trust you. Or when you have new ideas, when you go to a conference, like, oh, this is a really nice one that they're using in another publishing company, you can just check in with them like, hey, I've seen this. Do you think that could be relevant for your brand? What's your thoughts on that? And it's through that building that relationship and this dialogue that you make not only your product better, but you also work on the literacy in terms of data, and you have a good relationship with the editorial teams.
It becomes such a challenge when you are now in 6 countries and 5,000 employees. But congrats on building those relationships, because it is that we're doing the same thing with our audiences, aren't we? We're building relationships with them through our content, and that's it goes everywhere. So human of us. One last question for you. Well, maybe 2. One is, what impact has the increased audience engagement in your organization had on your bottom line and your brand loyalty, and how are you measuring that? Because that's fascinating.
Yep.
Well, start off with that one.
Okay. I was already questioning whether you're going to give an immediate second question. So what we see, what the impact is of users that are more engaged, we definitely see that they have a much lower churn score. And after that, also, they retain much better. They also do quite more easily the upselling for different kind of other products that we're offering, and therefore have a higher lifetime value. And we see that very clearly when you have, again, the 4 color groups. You can really easily plot the lifetime value or the churn score in those 4 quadrants, and you can immediately spot that the ones giving us the highest value and the highest loyalty are the green ones, so the highly engaged ones. So that really shows the value of working on engagement. And
And in terms of that quadrant, like your least churn, most engaged, do you use them as part of the sales process? Like, do they get a discount to offer to others? A lot like the other industries do. Do you, because they are the most loyal, because they're potentially the most likely to then share your content and push it out there, do you use that?
No, we don't have a loyalty program yet.
Okay.
So it's that I know that several B2C directors are thinking about, but we don't have a really big tradition at Mediahuis in loyalty programs. So every time when somebody of us goes to a conference, they always come back with this nice loyalty program ideas, but somehow it doesn't land within Mediahuis. I don't know why. It's something we don't have a tradition in, or something that's,
You can't have everything. You're doing so much already. It's not a bad thing. And one last question for you.
Okay, sure.
What engagement hack would you offer someone who's potentially either starting out or just started focusing on this engagement journey? Do you have a little hack for them?
Keep it simple. Keep it simple. Stay away from complicated measurements. Just use frequency or even recency or volume. Doesn't matter. Just pick one. And if you have the resources to investigate which one of those are really most predicting churn or propensity to buy, go ahead. But my biggest hack is keep it simple, keep it actionable, and work with color codes and segments, because it gives you a lot more insight on the groups that you have to work on. And it's easy to communicate like, hey, we're now doing this for the yellow group. We're now doing this for the red group. So that's really helped a lot in terms of communication across different teams. It's simple, it's cheap to do, and it's very effective.
Love that. Love that. Thank you so much, Jessica, for your time. This was fantastic.
Welcome. Yeah, definitely. Bye, Francesca.